Well, good morning. How are you holding up? If you've ever found yourself during this very strange time in our society when we all have to kind of rethink the way we live our lives, if you find yourself thinking, I'm a little stressed, how am I going to have the strength to go on? I think we can find a lot of strength in the life of the Christian whose life and death we celebrate today. It's St. Patrick's Day. And even though the parades are canceled, happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm wearing the greenest shirt I've got. It's kind of a pale green, not Kelly green. But I love St. Patrick. First of all, I've got a personal connection to St. Patrick, which I'm going to tell you about in just a second. But I love him as an example of how to live life in stressful times. You might know that Patrick was not Irish. He was Roman, a Roman citizen. His family lived in Britain near London. But when he was 16, he was kidnapped by Irish marauders. And he was enslaved for about 6 years, worked as a herder until he was able to escape. He was reunited with his family. But then he had a dream of the Irish he had just escaped from begging him to come back and bring them the good news of the Christian gospel. And so he studied to become a priest. He went back to Ireland where he lived for the next 40 years. He reached thousands with the gospel. He built many, many churches, and he died on this date in 461 AD in Saul, the city in Ireland where he planted his first church. But one of the most important things that St. Patrick actually did was he trained missionaries to go back down into Europe and evangelize. And one of the missionaries that Patrick trained, a man named Gallus, founded the town that my family is from. It's called St. Gallen. It's named after Gallus. So my family has 2 degrees of separation between us and St. Patrick because the city that we were from, the city I've lived in myself in Switzerland, was founded by one of the monks who was trained by St. Patrick. But Patrick, what a great example when it comes to living a life in spite of all the danger. Every morning, he would get up knowing that his life was threatened by the Irish. Many of the pagan Druid priests would threaten his life, and yet he prayed a prayer every morning that gave him strength. And I want to read you just a couple of verses from that. He would pray, I arise today through the strength of Christ's birth, through the strength of his crucifixion, through the strength of his resurrection, and through the strength of his descent for the judgment of doom. I arise today through God's strength to pilot me, God's might to uphold me, God's wisdom to guide me, and God's eye to look before me. I don't know if you noticed, but in that prayer, he says the word strength 6 times, and he's never referring to his own strength. He's only referring to the strength of God. That is where you and I can find strength to go on in these uncertain times. And that reminds me of David's words in Psalm 18, where he prays, I love you, Lord, my strength. In the spirit of St. Patrick, in the spirit of David, who wrote those words, you and I can go on in uncertain times if we know that it's in a loving God that we find our strength. You think about that, you'll have a great St. Patrick's Day and a great rest of the week. God bless.